This is what Asia is supposed to sound like. And it's what Beijing used to sound like too. But now...
So behind me right now, there are 6 lanes of traffic. It's obviously a very busy road here in downtown Beijing. We've got cars, we've got trucks, we've got buses, but very difficult to hear the noise of this traffic. If you walk through the streets, very easy to have a conversation. You can't hear much beeping and other sounds behind me. In fact, the only real sound you're going to hear is the sound of the tires moving across the gravel of the road. And that's in large measure because the people in China, and particularly in Beijing, have been upgrading their vehicles from traditional petrol-powered cars to electric vehicles. Government subsidies have largely been at play, and they've been very popular.
Yoni Bashan is the Australian's new North Asia correspondent. He's moved from Sydney, a pretty noisy city, to Beijing, a city that you would think would be very loud. Yoni, what was your first impression when you got to Beijing of the sound of the traffic?
Well, I was astonished. It was just so quiet. I'd be walking around the streets of Beijing and I was trying to acclimatise myself with this new environment. And what I was expecting when I came here was, first of all, a lot of pollution, which there is, but it's not on the scale that I expected at all. I mean, in fact, most days you wake up and the air is perfectly fine and clean and you should go outside and everything's great. And the other thing I was expecting was just this din, this cacophony coming from the traffic, because I know that Beijing is a very, very big city, which has a population roughly the size of Australia's, except it's condensed in the city. And I know there are a lot of cars here, and I know there are very big highways, but what I noticed was that you would walk along a 9, 10, 11 lane highway full of people, full of cars, full of buses and motorbikes, but you can't really hear them. What you can hear is everyone else. You can hear the birds. You can hear, unfortunately, the sound of people expectorating, but you can't hear the roar, that deafening roar that you get from line after line of car just in front of you and going at speed. And the particularly startling thing is that when these engines are idle, you can't hear them at all because they're all EVs.
Yeah, I think we've all had that experience of nearly being run over by an EV that we didn't hear coming. It's only the crackling of the leaves or the rubber on the road that makes you know that it's coming. When that is multiplied across an entire city of 25 million people, it's a remarkable transformation in a pretty short time though, right?
Yeah, and so, you know, you and I had a conversation about this. I happened to mention it to you and you were very encouraging about perhaps exploring this as a potential news item, which is what we've done today. And one of the things I learned very quickly is that this wasn't just something that happened by accident. This was very much by design here in China. So about 4 or 5 years ago, basically amid the pandemic and in the years that followed this enormous construction boom that happened across China between the Beijing Olympics and around 2016, noise complaints had begun one of the highest issues of environmental grievance in the country. It probably didn't outrank concerns about air and water quality, but it was right up there as a major concern of residents. In fact, in 2021, the government here said that around 4 million complaints had been made just about noise. And that was all kinds of noise, but social activities, construction, industrial machinery, and of course, traffic were among them. And so what the Chinese authorities did at the very highest level was make this a massive political priority for them. They made noise pollution one of the essential agenda items in their 5-year plan. And they basically said, by 2025, we're going to increase compliance with noise restrictions to 85% across the country. And of course, within 1 or 2 years, they met that. And the compliance rate is sort of above 85%, which was the target they set. But they did it by employing different policy levers to A, get people to take up EVs, and B, regulate the amount of traffic that's on the highways in Beijing, in Shanghai, in Guangzhou, in all the big cities. And some of the cities have different rules around who can drive and when they can drive and all that sort of stuff. But it was essentially a combination of policy incentives to get people to dump their petrol-powered cars and take up EVs. And it was also design planning and traffic measures that just saw fewer people actually on the roads.
It's so interesting in this command economy. You're not really surprised that there's a high compliance rate with a government directive. But what is surprising is that they listened to people, that they cared, that Beijing has found the noise overwhelming. Because the noise comes from the Chinese Communist Party's big goal, which is industrialisation, raising living standards, making China the most powerful economy in the world. What do you think about the fact that they listened and they maybe took some sort of backward steps on productivity to get that noise down?
Well, there's two things I'd say about that. The first is we've all watched the rising Chinese middle class and the emergence of that over the recent decades. Now, what came with that rising middle class was a society that expected higher levels of living standards and quality of life. That's what's led to these complaints. And what the government here appears to have noticed is that with these millions of complaints, this deluge of complaints about noise, what they had was not a minor nuisance that they needed to handle or something they could just brush aside as not particularly important. No. This was becoming a political problem because it was contributing to discord in the social harmony, in the quality of life, and it was probably going to become a political issue and a potential pressure point. So they had to act on it. And when they did, they decided to act on it so comprehensively. So essentially, 16 government departments came together at the highest levels and set orders for all the municipalities to reach certain targets and restrictions. And that meant banning certain products from coming into the country, setting limits on how much noise could be made, what the traffic should look like, who could drive on the roads, and other measures that just brought down the din across this society. And that now makes walking around a place like Beijing a very pleasant experience.
The other thing that seems to be absent is the honking. And I think we've all had that experience of arriving in an Asian city, whether it's Hanoi or Bangkok or whatever, and realising that the way we use our horns in Australia, which is an expression of anger or ridicule or rage, is different to them. They're kind of, honk, 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 here I come, or honk, honk, I see you, or honk, honk, merge now. Why are Beijingers not honking?
Because they're not supposed to. There are no honking zones in these cities, not just in Beijing, but elsewhere as well. You're not supposed to honk. Honking is not an expression of yourself or an expression of your emotion over here. You're just not supposed to do it. So that's why you're not hearing honking. In fact, the one thing I noticed, and I don't want to over-exaggerate the situation. Like when you're walking along a 9-lane highway, you can hear the sound of the cars, but what you're hearing is some of the petrol-powered cars, which certainly still exist, especially in Beijing. Not everyone is driving an EV, but in large measure they are. But what I seem to be hearing most is just the sound of the tyres on these roadways. And even in that respect, the authorities have been acting in a very comprehensive fashion. They laid something like 300 million square metres of reduced noise surface along the roads just to make the sound of the tyres a bit quieter. So we have this incredible assault on noise that was enacted at the highest levels. And again, it seems to have drawn its genesis from sheer people power, which is not something I expected to see in a country like this.
You mentioned air pollution, and behind you in Beijing, I can see a bit of beautiful blue sky, which is kind of surprising. Since you've been in Beijing, I added the weather app for Beijing to my phone just to check out how it was for you every day. And I'm alarmed by the particulate pollution measure that they show every day. There's a lot of stuff you're breathing in that can't be that good. But all these EVs need to be charged up, and in China, that means coal-fired power stations. We know that China is building coal-fired power at a huge rate. They're massive customers for coal, and they dig up a lot of it of their own. So will the rise of EVs actually reduce air pollution in China, or has it just been exported to the countryside?
I would suggest it's probably been exported to the countryside. I mean, who knows where we go from here in terms of how they power the network and how you plug in your EV to get your $8 worth of charge to then drive your Didi or your Uber around the city all day. But for now, the air quality here appears to have improved out of sight. I haven't had a day in Beijing, and I've only been here for 2 weeks, but there hasn't been a day in Beijing where I've actually thought to myself, it's not a good day to go outside. I mean, the air quality has always been excellent or at worst, good. And at a level of good, you're still advised to go outside, but some people who have chronic illnesses might want to wear a mask or some other measure. But generally speaking, you would expect that this pollution is going somewhere. I mean, one thing I would say to you, Claire, is that this is certainly a country and it's certainly a leadership that's very much got its eyes on reducing its climate footprint. I mean, yes, there is a strong desire for coal and for generation and for and for keeping the society moving. I mean, one thing that I'm constantly told by the experts and academics that I'm meeting over here is that one of the core features of Chinese society is survival, not just liberty. So for us in the West, we're very concerned with liberty, but over here, liberty is very important, but actually survival is even more important. So yes, there is a reliance on coal for now, but this is very much a leadership that's looking towards a climate future. And I mean, you don't need to go very far to realize that they're investing a great amount of energy and attention and money into wind, solar, batteries, and hydro. And the other observation I'd make, again, from my very short amount of time here, is that this is a government that when it wants something to get done, it can do it at breakneck speed. It's done it in the past, and it's going to be very exciting to see where it goes from here in the future.
Yoni Bashan is the Australian's North Asia correspondent. Thanks, Yoni.
Thank you.